Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Sports on the Positive Tip Podcast. I'll be joined by my partner, Kenny Squared, in just a bit. This is where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith, and we love to talk also about inspiration. And we have such an inspirational guest for you to listen to. We got to talk to best-selling author and personal improvement speaker Paul Roscoe White. And Paul talked about his one of five project. He talked about what the winning process should actually look and feel like. And oh my gosh, this is going to stick in my head. I know it'll stick in yours. Work hard and don't suck. So that is the title of his upcoming book. And he talked about what exactly he means by that. And oh, by the way, we got to talk some Alabama football, little Nick Saban. You don't want to miss this. Let's get at it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sports on the Positive Tip, where we love to have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith and inspiration. And we have got an inspirational guest with us here tonight, and we can't wait to get to him. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce him. And Kenny, you can get the ball rolling with the first couple of questions. But I want to introduce best-selling author and personal improvement speaker Roscoe White to the podcast. Roscoe, it is so great to have you here. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to have the unique conversation of introducing sports and some of the other things that we may go, the other rabbit holes that we may go down, because I really think that I actually have a chapter in my new book coming out that says everything you need to know from life you can learn from the game of football.
Wow. So
these kinds of conversations, I think, can go down a number of different ways, and I'm anxious to see where this one goes. Thanks.
I love that. We got to come back to that. Ken, go ahead, man. I'll let you go ahead and kick us off.
All right. So I guess to start out with, can you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of like how you got to the point of being an author?
Yeah, sure. Wow, that's a twisty road. Hang on, because it's kind of a ride. So I grew up in Alabama. I'm a cotton farmer by trade. My dad was a cotton farmer, and I knew one thing for certain when I graduated high school, and that was that I did not want to be a cotton farmer for the rest of my life. And so I went to college, failed miserably, ended up enlisting in the Air Force almost out of necessity in 1997, and met my wife shortly after basic training. We're still together 26 years later. Decided to go back to school, did well that time, put in to be an officer, ended up getting to fly jets for a number of years. And then after I retired, I was just a little bit lost, kind of lost my why for a lot of things. My motivation for the reason that I did most of the things in my life was either the military or my kids. And well, now my kids had grown up, they had gotten their driver's license and were kind of able to take themselves where they needed to go and could feed and nurture themselves. And then I lost the Air Force, which was my reason to keep my hair cut short and my face shaved and keep myself in shape and those kinds of things. So I spent about 2 years after I retired just really searching for my new why, my new motivation, my new horizon to look at and try to peek over, and ended up 2021 on Father's Day. My kids, all three of my kids, none of them called, texted, or said happy Father's Day. And that one, it kind of stung a little bit, to be honest. So, and normally, in the military, you kind of get used to missing some of these quote unquote special days, but for some reason, this one kind of stung a little bit. So I did some introspection and I figured out what the problem was. And the problem was as the protector and provider of the family, I'd kind of let the family diverge just a little bit. As the kids got older and got into their own things, I'd kind of let the family dynamics kind of scatter, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And so I called a family meeting. We got back on track. That was all good. Well, fast forward a little bit. I got this idea. My wife and I came to the realization that our kids were raised. Like we had kind of done our job up to a point. We had taught our kids right from wrong. They knew to choose right. They could feed and clothe themselves. So I decided I was going to write down all the dumb dad advice that I've been giving them for 26 years and in bullet format. Then I was going to write one 8.5 by 11 page on what each of those topics meant. Well, I ended up with 160 of these topics, which is way too much for a book.
Wow.
So, I mean, it would have seriously, it had been like a 300 or 400 page book in the format that I'm working with. So I decided to break it up. I chose 60 of them. That's going to be the first version, the kind of the volume 1 of Work Hard, Don't Suck, a moral compass to raising your kids with honor, discipline, and character. Well, in the process of trying to get that book going, I got in touch with a couple of publisher guys through different connections and networking. And one of the dudes who was going to help me publish these books, shout out to Mike Capuzzi up at Bite Size Books up in Philly, he asked me, he says, well, do you have anything that's ready to go now? All right, so let me rewind back to 2009. I was in Alaska, and me and 2 of my buddies had gone on this pretty epic hiking trip. And I had written the story down. I started in 2019 writing the story down, just took a timeline of the events that happened, started filling in the blanks. And after 3 years or so, I had a book. And I told Mike, my buddy, this. I told him, yeah, well, I mean, I got this old thing sitting on the shelf over here with a little bit of work. It might end up being a book. And so that's the book that we put out in December. It's called No New Lessons. Mm-hmm. And it's about a hiking journey that me and 2 of my fighter pilot buddies went on in Alaska in 2009. And it's full of bad decisions and poor planning and folly and, the battle of wills and overcoming obstacles and just lots of really good life lessons that you pull out of there. And I found, as I was writing it, I found that, hold up, I'm not learning anything new in this journey. As I'm writing the story, I'm realizing I didn't learn anything new. I had learned all these lessons before, or at least I thought I did. Mm-hmm. I'm just relearning the same lessons. That's where the title No New Lessons came from.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a journey.
I told you it was a twisty road.
Oh, wow. That is a twisty road, but I love it. And especially in your experience, and especially in the circles that you're in, because you obviously know a lot of other fighter pilots, how many go through that really struggle once it's done, right? Where you've called it quits, you retire, because it almost sounded like there was something missing there. There was an emptiness there, okay, my kids grew up, and what? They didn't say Happy Father's Day. Is this common? And if so, what are some things that, and I know you're going to go down that road, but what are some things that you've seen that help other men or even women, replace that void?
Oh gosh, man, there's a lot to unpack there. So I wouldn't even just say fighter pilots. I would say veterans in general.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or maybe even broaden the blanket a little bit more and say, people who provide a service, who are dedicated to a service, our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, our paramedics, our wildland firefighting crews, our military servicemen and women. And when you devote your entire adult life to the service of other people, and then suddenly one day that's over, that's a significant emotional event for a lot of people. And I think more often than not, there's kind of this now what moment at the end of it. And I know I certainly had mine. I mean, luckily for me, I had a job lined up afterwards, and it was a good job. And it was a job that I enjoyed, that was kind of still in the industry. And it was a fairly easy transition for me to do that. And one of the issues, I think, was, though, when you're in the military, it really is a 24/7, 365 type job. You're always on call. You're always thinking about it. You're always preparing. Your level of alertness and situational awareness is always at the highest peak levels. Even if you're in garrison, even if you're in training, you're preparing to do something else. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden that's over with. And I remember about the first 6 months after I retired, coming home at the end of an 8-hour day of work and sitting at my house, kind of just staring at the walls going, I mean, I should still be at work for another 4 or 5 hours. Right. I don't know what to do with all this time. And honestly, man, I've known really good friends of mine who their normal everyday battle rhythm was get up and go to work, come home, get home like 6 o'clock in the evening, 7 o'clock in the evening, fix themselves a drink at dinner, take a shower, go to bed. Mm-hmm. Well, then they retire. And now instead of getting home at 6 or 7 in the evening, they're getting home at 3 in the afternoon. And they maintain that same battle rhythm. Come home, fix something to eat, make a drink. It's only 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
I finished my drink. Okay, well, let me make another drink. Okay, well, let me make another drink. And before you know it, they're going to meetings and their marriages are on the rocks. And it's all because we've just been so conditioned over all these years in the military to maintaining this high level of performance. And then all of a sudden you just kind of snap the throttles back and you're kind of gliding for a little bit. And man, I tell you, if you have any veterans or servicemen and women of any of those professions that I mentioned, you brought up, how do we deal with that? How do you get over something like that? And my thing that I've really had to learn, and it's something that you just, there's no better way to say it other than you just have to do it, is you have to become vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think as men, if we want to focus on men just for a second, and again, I'm not a doctor, or I'm not a professional in any of this. This is just my experience, but I really think that men generally suck at being vulnerable because from a very early age, we're taught masculinity equals bravado, equals hide your feelings, be the rock, don't cry, those kinds of things. Dude, I cried like a baby when my 18-year-old played his last football game back in November.
Yeah.
We hugged in the end zone after the game. I'm choking up now. We hugged in the end zone of the game. Because I saw my son, and he's the last one. I didn't cry like that with my other two because I knew I had one more in the basket, right? When my last kid played his last game, my kids had devoted their life to the game of football. 365 days of the year. They were in the gym, they were practicing, they were running sprints, they were doing everything for the game of football. And then one day, just like that, it was over.
Wow.
And man, those emotions just came flowing, and I'm not ashamed of it. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I put a post on social media that next day with a picture of me hugging my son. He's, we're both 6'3", we're big old boys in the end zone, hugging and crying it out. And I was like, yeah, real men cry. And I think that, to answer your question, I think that that's really what it comes down to, man, as men, we just have to be a lot more comfortable being vulnerable and opening up and talking about our feelings, which sometimes is very uncomfortable, but that's how you get past some of that stuff. If you're having problems in your life, like the best thing you can do is just talk about it.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that. Ken, I'll jump into one more question. I love that answer, and then I'll turn it back over to you. I'm really anxious to hear about the 1 of 5 project. And it was so interesting how you broke that down. So I'm not going to spoil that. Tell us a little bit about what that's all about and how that's become really a great foundation for you. What's the 1 of 5 project?
Yeah. So back to the story of me becoming an author, the guy that I was talking to in Philly, he had a project coming up called I Love America. And it's a compilation book. You can find it on Amazon. Just Google it. His name's Mike Capuzzi. And he asked 13 veterans to help him write this book. We each wrote a chapter for it. And at the end of the chapter, we were to issue a personal challenge to the reader to help make them better individually or help keep America awesome. Right. And I mean, I was kind of beating around it a little bit, but I was just having a hard time articulating what I wanted to say. And I was kind of missing the mark a little bit. So Mike and I were on the phone one day, we were brainstorming, and I said, hey man, have you ever heard that quote by Jim Rohn that says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? He goes, oh yeah. I said, well, what if you looked at it as soon as I say that to someone, they start thinking about the 5 people that they hang out with the most. Well, what if you looked at it from the perspective of being one of the 5 people, realizing that your actions influence others, right? And that's where the 1 of 5 project came from. And it's really selfish. It's all about the individual. It's all about you and your personal journey to being a little bit better every single day. Our mission statement is, it's pretty simple: improve, ignite, inspire. Improve yourself, ignite a fire inside you that makes you want to win harder and win more. And that will in turn inspire other people to want to follow.
I love that. I really had never thought of how, because I had to go back, especially to, my regular work days and then when I was younger, and how much I became part of our 5, 6 guys even, and how much we became alike and how much we fed off each other. That made so much sense to me, the way you broke it down. Go ahead, Kenny.
So something I thought was very interesting. You have a lot of experience when it comes to coaching and instructing others. What would you say is like one of the top qualities that like you can tell this person is going to make it? Whether you're talking about like a football player, whether you're talking about someone top quality in that way.
Let's see. You're talking about from the player's perspective. So if I'm
Like
coaching,
from
if I'm coaching a player, how can I identify this kid's got it versus somebody that doesn't?
yeah, like what is like that quality that you see? Yeah.
Yeah. So um there's a lot of layers there. One of when I used to coach kids, I had every practice I would make them, I would hold up 3 fingers and I would make them recite, hey, what's Coach White's big 3? And my big 3 were attitude, attention, and effort. And we would go through and I'd spend the entire season just beating that into these kids, attitude, attention, and effort. And man, that's one of those secrets to life. It's super easy. They're super easy to say, much harder to do in practice. But if you can come in day to day with a good attitude and kind of be open-minded and stay positive, pay attention to the instruction and the coaching that's been given to you, and then give maximum effort in whatever you're doing, then I think you're going to see improvements. That's great. There's also quotes out there that say things like hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Mm-hmm. All those kind of cliche euphemisms. But then I had my little 3 as well. And this is where you kind of get a little bit more into almost the intangibles of a person, right? And my little 3 were accountability, responsibility, and humility. And I think that those, I probably should switch them and make those the big 3 and then the other one's the little 3. But I think if I could pinpoint a few things in a person that lets me know if these guys are going to be the kind of people who are going to enter the growth zone versus the fixed mindset and really just keep an upward trajectory in life, I'd say that those 3 attributes or those 3 character traits are probably right up at the top of the list. You're responsible for your actions and your words and your gear and your time, and you're responsible to everything that revolves around you in a day-to-day situation. And then you hold yourself accountable for when you mess up, right? Mm-hmm. For when you fail at your responsibilities, you hold yourself accountable. And if somebody else holds you accountable, you don't make excuses. You say, Roger that, got it, own it, and move on, learn the lessons from it, and then move on, apply those lessons to the next time. And then finally, probably the number 1 is having the humility to be able to say, I screwed up in the first place. If you just have that level of humility to say, hey man, sorry, I messed that up. Tell me how I can not mess it up again. If you take those 3 and combine them with the other 3, as long as you're humble enough to say that you messed up and you messed up going full speed, dude, I can teach you anything, man. I mean, that's that attitude coming in of, I'm going to be a champion. I'm humble enough to accept the criticism that's coming to me. I'm going to give enough effort and pay attention to what you're telling me, give enough effort to make the changes so that I don't make that mistake the next time. I mean, all those things kind of intertwine together. Hopefully, I mean, that was a really long answer to a very simple question, I think, but.
Awesome.
No, that's great.
Yeah, that was awesome. I want to go back down that road for a second, Roscoe. Because you mentioned to be the champion of your own life and that there is a whole process to that and a process to winning. Talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So have you guys, I don't know if you've read the book Winning by Tim Grover. He's also got another one called Relentless by Tim Grover. Tim Grover was he was the personal trainer for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, these high level elite athletes. Very, very good reading. Yeah. But he really outlines kind of the mentality in Relentless. He really outlines the mentality of a champion and really kind of what it takes. And when somebody says, what does it take to be a champion? They say everything you've got. They're not really lying. It takes a little bit of everything. I mean, you really have to dig deep. You really have to commit to it. And that's what I say when I say it on my website, become the champion of your own life. I think that winning is a process. I really do. And the process is simple enough. It's just not easy. That's the biggest difference. And I break it down into 3 phases: plan, posture, perform. Plan out. So sit there and do a little self-inspection, figure out what your goals are, take your dreams and your ideas and turn those into goals. And we have methods and processes on how to do that, but plan out exactly what it's going to take to reach those goals in detail, step by step, with milestones and timelines associated with them. And then posture your resources so that you can execute that plan eventually. Posture your resources. So if your plan is to be able to run a 5K, well, you probably need to go get some good running shoes. You probably need a water bottle. You might want to go get some earbuds so you can listen to your jams while you're running, things like that. So get your resources in order so that when you need it, you can reach over and grab it. You don't have to go searching for it. And then finally come to the performance phase and just start knocking down the dominoes that you set up. Knock them down one at a time. Focus on what's right in front of you. We have a saying in the fighter pilot community. We say, kill the closest alligator to the boat. You got to get across the pond and it's full of alligators, but sometimes you just got to kill the closest alligator to the boat and keep rowing and keep moving forward.
Wow. Wow. And it sounds to me like that as specific as you were getting, and you mentioned Michael Jordan, there's a difference between, because there were other guys that are that were just as talented as Michael Jordan, but it's those things that you were mentioning that made that difference, right? That make that difference to someone that is a champion, the Tom Brady's, the Nick Sabans. We'll get to him in just a little bit. Ken, go ahead.
And what would you say is your personal journey of like self-enlightenment and self-improvement?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. So back to when I retired and I kind of lost my why for a lot of things. I got really good over the next couple of years of eating Cheez-Its and watching Netflix and watching my reflection grow in the mirror. All not so good things. Right. Well, I was on, I never was really a voracious reader at all. I read for entertainment. I read, nonfiction or fiction stuff and, kind of like watching a movie. I guess it was about 2.5 years ago. I was on YouTube watching a video and it was one of those 5 books every man should read or something like that. And so I went and opened myself an Audible account and started listening to this book that was recommended. It sounded interesting right off just, by the title and whatnot. And within 10 minutes, I had a notebook and I was taking notes of different rabbit holes I needed to go down and explore. And that book, I got so into it. It's about a 12-hour listen or so. And I got so into it that I was starting to look for more opportunities in my day to be able to listen to this book. And so I started going for walks around my neighborhood. I'd put on my earbuds and I'd go walk 45 minutes around my neighborhood. And that's 45 minutes of me time just listening to my book. And then I can make notes on my phone of things that I wanted to go and research and read up about later. And after a few weeks of doing that, I noticed, hold up, my back doesn't hurt anymore. My knees are starting to feel good again. My ankles feel good. And then, May last year, I was in Alabama visiting family. And I was out walking one morning, listening to a book like I normally do. I'd kind of gotten into that routine and that habit. And I picked a tree about 200 yards down. I said, I'm going to jog to that darn tree. And I jogged to the tree. It wasn't pretty. Don't get me wrong. It was an ugly jog. If you even want to call it a jog, it was more like a lope, but I made it to the tree. I was like, okay, I can do this. And I picked another tree and I just started stringing them together until now I'm at a point where I feel like physically I'm in probably some of the best shape I've ever been in. And it's just been those little finding the next tree kind of moments, of stacking these things up. Oh, by the way, I've learned to love reading. Now, I've got stacks of books in my room with highlighters and pens and sticky notes all over them. And it was just like you said, it was my wife said, she says, you didn't have a midlife crisis. You had a midlife enlightenment where I've really reached this point where I just can't get enough of it, man. I think I'm 46 years old and I don't think I've ever had my mind, body, and soul balanced as good as it is right now.
Wow.
And it's a deliberate effort. Don't get me wrong, for your listeners, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's been 2.5 years in the making,
Yes.
but it's identifying those pitfalls, identifying where you're coming up short and some of your weaknesses and really working on those while maintaining your strengths at the same time. And before you know it, you get things in balance. And man, frequency, vibration, all that Tesla stuff, it's true, man. When things are in harmony and things are in balance and frequencies are resonating, it feels really good, man. Think of a 4-piece harmony when you're singing, right? How awesome that feels when everybody's hitting it. That's kind of what it feels to have your mind, body, and soul balanced really well.
Wow. Wow. Love that. What a what a journey. And I love that you said it wasn't easy and it took time. It takes time. And last business, so to speak, question for me is you also talk about the importance of goal setting. And I love it seems from a little bit of a different angle than I had read in the past. How does goal setting play into everything you do every day and what you teach?
Well, you got to have a target to aim for, right?
Yeah.
You can't just float around nebulously in your life, um, or you're going to end up spinning your wheels. You're going to end up going in circles. You have to have something to aim for. And for me, my wife and I have usually been pretty disciplined about always having a 1, 3, and a 5-year plan for our family, and then stretching that out and having a 3, 5, and a 10-year plan. And obviously those things are going to change as life events happen. You're going to add or subtract or modify, or what we call smart audibles, to the plan. But if you don't have a target to aim for, then where are you going? Like, you jump in your car and you don't have a destination, what's going to happen? You're going to driving around town and get nowhere, right? Kind of the same mentality with your life. If you don't have a target to aim for, if you don't have a destination, if you don't have that goal hanging out there, then you're really just kind of following this squiggly line all over town doing nothing. So when we talk about goal setting in the 1 to 5 project, it's usually personal goals. It could be financial or relationship goals or whatever. I mean, I've talked to businesses, I've talked to leaders and individuals. Usually it's more individual based. But one of the first things that I have people do, if your listeners go to my website, and there's a tab at the top that says Work Hard, Don't Suck. And that's the program Work Hard, Don't Suck, not the book. Those two are a little bit different. I just like the words, the punchiness of the words so much that I had to create a program based on it. But the first button at the top of that page is a self-inspection checklist. And one of the first things I ask you to do is take off all your clothes and stand in front of the mirror naked and just stare at yourself. And I bet you within 60 seconds, you're going to start to identify some things that you can work on. Maybe you got that one eyebrow that sticks straight out, kind of like that, like I have to pick out every 3 or 4 days or so. Or you got that one hair that comes out of your ears, or maybe you needed to shave a little bit better, or maybe your shirt wasn't pressed exactly right, or maybe you stare at your midsection and you're, I could spend a day or two in the gym and work that off, So that's what I talk about. And then
Awesome.
obviously, probably something that you've read, this is common knowledge, is following the SMART mantra for goal setting: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. And I think that if you can keep your goals set in that framework, then I think they're easily attainable. Now, once you've done that and you've got that goal created in a way that it fits into that SMART mantra, well, now it's objective. Like, you can grade yourself on how you're doing on that. You transfer that into a plan by setting that goal out there and then working from the target backwards. What do I have to do to get to the goal, right? Start at the goal and work backwards from there on how you get there. What are the barriers? What are my limitations? What resources do I need? What targets do I need to hit intermediately so that I can then get to my goal? Like, let's say you're starting off on a college career. That's a 4 or 5 year expedition the evolution that you're getting ready to go on. And it's very, very hard to focus on the finish line. But what if you broke that down and worked backwards and go senior year, junior year, sophomore, freshman year, and then you break it down further into exam A, exam B, exam C, and you focused on those intermediate goals and how you're going to plan and study and do the research and do the papers and all that, the homework, to knock that first test out of the park. Woohoo, got a 90 on the first test. Cool. Let me see if I can get a 92 on the second test. And you just keep that front sight focus going as you move through. Before you know it, you've gone 5 years, you're graduating with honors, and you're moving off to the next chapter of your life. That's how I like to break it down.
That's awesome. And it's also, it's doable and it's simple too, but it just makes so much sense. I love it.
Well, it's simple, but it's not easy. There's a big difference between those two words. Simple does not mean easy. And for your listeners to take something away, simple does not mean easy. I can break you down things into 2 or 3 steps, but they're going to take you years to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. This has been amazing, by the way. So want to take a minute or two on some Alabama football?
Sure, let's do it.
So I'll say, if you were to take a guess, how many Alabama players you think are in the NFL right now? And I don't know the answer.
Oh,
Kenny might know it.
Well, I guarantee you, I could walk into the living room and ask my son, and he could spit them off, and he could probably name them off to you in alphabetical order. Those kids eat this stuff up. I don't know, man. It's been interesting. You know, you got the Power Five conferences, but then you really got like the Power 4 or 5 teams that are starting to really kick out all these high profile, really good 5-star players. And Bama, Georgia, OSU, Clemson there for a while, maybe kind of tailing off just a little bit. But some of these programs are just consistently kicking out players to the NFL. It's amazing. And, you asked me in the pre-interview if I followed a team. In the NFL, I don't, but I like to watch individual players play. And so it was really fascinating to me to watch the Super Bowl this year, to watch Jalen Hurts and some of the Bama players and just the individual talents that they are. And Jalen Hurts, my goodness, what a man that dude is. I mean, you talk about back to your question earlier, Kenny, was the traits, the valuable traits that you see in somebody. That is a humble man. That is a man that knows his role in the team, and he plays his role well at top levels. And when his number was called, he just went in and executed like it was no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Ken, you got a football question?
Kind of more general with when you're talking Alabama football, how big really is it down there? Because I'm in Cleveland. There's a little bit of Ohio State, but how big is the culture? Is it as big as as people kind of make it out to be?
It's a religion. It is. So okay, I like telling stories, and I'm going to tell you another one. My wife is a military brat. Her dad was a Marine. And when she was, I think, 18 years old, they moved from California to Alabama. He was getting stationed in Alabama for his last assignment. And no kidding, within 24 hours of her moving to Alabama, she had to choose Alabama or Auburn. And she had just met a guy down the street in her neighborhood that was an Auburn fan, so she chose Auburn. Well, then fast forward a couple of years, and she and I started dating. And I've been a Bama fan since I could say Alabama. And I told her, I was like, look, you're either going to convert or we're going to fight for a lot of years, because I can't abide that. And she did the right thing. She converted. Now everything in our house is Roll Tide. So
I should have put my foot down, because I'm a Met fan and Kenny's a Yankee fan, but I let it go. I let it go.
I'd like to see that feats of strength on who's going to win, Mets or Yankees. Who's better right now?
See, we support. See, we it's hard because we used to trash talk a little bit, but we really don't much anymore. So, but they both got great teams, but I'm riding with my Mets though.
Right on.
Have
you seen the documentary? Have you seen the documentary on ESPN Plus of Derek Jeter? I think it's called The Captain is the name of it.
Yeah. Oh,
have you seen that?
Yeah.
I just downloaded that the other day. I was listening to another podcast, and they were interviewing Aaron Andrews, and Aaron Andrews spoke highly of that thing. And so I went and actually downloaded ESPN Plus with the intention of watching that. I heard it's pretty good, so I'm going to have to go check that out.
I would say some of the traits you talked about of being a champion are definitely in Derek Jeter, no doubt.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I'll go check it out.
You'll see that. Roscoe, this has been unbelievable. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me, man.
We've got to get him back on, Kenny, because I think we just scratched the surface.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been phenomenal. Thank you for what you're doing. God bless what you're doing. And the difference that you're making, and the journey that you're on is spectacular, and we're going to continue to follow it. And when the book comes out, I think you can pre-order it, right? Did I see that? That I can pre-order?
I haven't really gotten to that point yet. Now it's at the editor right now. And talk about being humble, Kenny. Nothing will humble you down like getting a book back from an editor. But it's there was more red on the page than there was black on the page, just for reference. But I'm aiming for April 1st to have that available on Amazon. That may be a lofty goal right now, but that's the goal anyways, is April 1st.
Okay. Well, we will have a million ways to contact you when we post this podcast out there. So we'll make sure we have plenty of links out there so folks can contact you.
Yes, sir.
So Roscoe, thank you again. Kenny, why don't you go ahead and take us home?
All righty, this is Squared End.
Kenny with Roscoe.
with Sports on the Positive Tip. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roscoe. We'll be in touch.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Okay.